Hi, everyone. My name is Vincent Del Casino. I'm the Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs. I'm here to welcome you to this open forum event with our System Chancellor, Chancellor Castro. So we're really excited to have him here. To start this event, I'd like to begin with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land on which we are meeting on today as the traditional home of the Puijan Ohlone speaking people of the present day Muwekwa Ohlone tribe. The Puijan Ohlone were missionized into both Missions Dolores and Santa Clara. The present day Muwekwa Ohlone tribe is comprised of all known surviving Native American lineages aboriginal to the San Francisco Bay region who trace their ancestry through the missions San Jose, Santa Clara, and Dolores, and the historic federally recognized Verona Band of Alameda County. In the Muwekma Ohlone language, Cocheño, Muwekma means the people. Without them, we would not have access to the gathering. We take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land. With that acknowledgement, I'd like to turn this over now to President Papazian, who will be introducing the Chancellor. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost Del Casino, and welcome to all of you who have joined us today. It's not every day that we have the pleasure of hosting the Chancellor of the California State University on our campus. And even though we're virtual, we are still here all together as a broad community. And so I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And I want to thank all who have been working so hard behind the scenes to make this possible. Chancellor Castro is new to his role. He serves as the 8th Chancellor to lead the California State University, but he's a longtime friend of San Jose State and the San Jose region. Having assumed the CSU Chancellorship in January of 2021, he is the first Californian and first person of color to serve in this important leadership role. The grandson of immigrants from Mexico and the son of a single mother, Chancellor Castro was the first in his family to graduate from a university. And like so many others in the CSU and so many of our students here at San Jose State. He earned a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's in public policy from the University of California, Berkeley, and a PhD in higher education policy and leadership from Stanford University. I said to Dr. Castro that you may have received your education in those 2 other schools here in the Broad Bay area, but there's none more special than San Jose State. Dr. Castro's work in leadership and public policy is important, and he has been generous in sharing his knowledge with colleagues near and abroad to become better leaders in their respective roles. It is with great pleasure that I introduce Chancellor Joseph Castro and share with him from all of you a warm Spartan welcome. Chancellor Castro.
Thank you, President Papazian. Good morning, everybody. And it's a great pleasure to be with you virtually. As President Papazian said, it's the most important thing is that we're together today. And I'm excited to visit. I'm looking forward to doing so in person as soon as possible when it's safe. It's most important for me to hear from you. So I won't say a whole lot, but I want you to know, number one, how excited I am to be with you today, how proud I am as your chancellor of all that's happened at San Jose State, especially under President Papazian's leadership, and that I actually have a lot of connections to San Jose. So I know about the community. My grandfather who raised me had 4 brothers, and all 4 of them left the Central Valley as young men and built lives in and around San Jose. And so as a kid, I remember visiting all the time. And one of my uncles, who's a role model for me, taught in San Jose for many years and still lives there. So I know a lot about the community. I love what's happening at San Jose State, and I'm learning more today about it. The students that I met with this morning were just incredible, so talented, so committed, and so many of them from the San Jose area, and so many of your graduates, 70% of them stay in the area to become leaders. And I'll tell you, that is so important, not just for Silicon Valley, but for California, that San Jose State is playing that key leadership role in educating talented students from all different backgrounds, providing them with the tools to be leaders, and in that way really has earned that designation as the #1 transformative, most transformative university in the country. So I'm excited to hear from you, and love to hear your thoughts, and I'll do my best to answer your questions as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chancellor Castro. And I'm guessing if we delve a little further into your family's story, that we probably have a few Spartans in your background.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're going to do that. We're going to do that. And what this means, of course, is that makes you an honorary Spartan, not in your role as chancellor, but in your role as a member, an extended member, if you will, of our community. So just a wonderful, wonderful set of connections. Let me start by thanking all of you who submitted questions for Chancellor Castro. We opened this up and we received many, and dozens of questions on a whole host of topics important to our campus community. So I'm going to try to go through them and cluster them and really bring out the ones that perhaps have the widest import. And so Chancellor Castro, we're going to keep you very busy here. Let's start with a broad question. And these are really two intertwined questions. What is your vision for the CSU system? And as you think ahead, what do you want your legacy to be?
Thank you. Well, my vision for the CSU is for it to be universally embraced by all Californians and actually all Americans and beyond. I do believe, as the nation's largest university, and I would say most consequential university, we have that opportunity to tell our story in a way that really does raise awareness. And by doing that, it will lead to greater investment of public and private funds into our system. As you know, President Papazian, one of the challenges we face is resources. And we have wonderful people, great ideas. We want to continue that. We want to go to the next level. And I think it's going to require more resources from public and private entities. And so my vision is to inspire that. And by doing so, we'll also be able to continue to educate the most talented students from all different backgrounds. And San Jose State certainly models that in the Bay Area. And I know with your undergraduate and graduate programs, you not only fuel the economy, but you actually prepare a new generation of leaders who are going to make some, I think, bold changes in the future that will take our country to the next level. So that's, in general, that's my vision. I think we're fully capable of achieving it. And in terms of legacy, I don't know. I mean, I'd like us to close those equity gaps that we have been stubborn. And my belief is that every student has the gifts to be successful. So the CSU already models that behavior. And I'd like us to try to close those gaps in the future. I'd like us to serve more students. I'd like to see us utilize technology in a much more strategic way. And I'd like to see us have a faculty that truly reflects the diversity of our students. So those are the things that I'm interested in working on as we strive to, provide a high quality education that's probably the best value in the country.
Well, that's a a lot of work, and I know you can't do it alone. And I just want to assure you that we here at San Jose State, as the founding campus of the California State University, are committed to those very values, and look forward to working with you hand in glove as we achieve this more broadly.
Thank you.
But to do this sort of thing, our campus community is really interested in thinking about that's the future and that's the legacy. But we really need to also think about today and
Right.
tomorrow. And the next group of questions are really focused on the impact of the pandemic and how we come back to campus. And so I'd like to talk a little bit and ask you to reflect a little bit on the CSU policy on the COVID-19 vaccinations for the fall semester.
Sure.
First question in this context, why can the CSU mandate that students get rubella mumps vaccine, but not the COVID-19 vaccine?
Sorry, Mary, could you repeat the question? I want to catch the beginning of it.
Is why can the CSU mandate that certain vaccines, like the rubella mumps, can be mandated, but not the COVID-19 vaccine? And how does this question fit into the vaccination policy that you've just announced?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the question. And we've been working together, you and I and all the other leaders of the CSU to think through the best way to repopulate our campuses in the fall. Our new policy that we're developing really aims to try to get us to herd immunity on all the campuses as quickly as possible. And that will help to ensure the safety for everybody. And I do believe that will lower the stress level for everyone as well. So it's vitally important, in my opinion, that all of us get vaccinated. The policy will have some limited exemptions for religious and medical purposes that would be documented. But again, my hope is that we can inspire through this requirement the cooperation to do it, and that will enable us to get to a point where we can actually innovate in powerful ways that I've been hearing about at San Jose State. And it also enables us to be responsive to, I've heard from literally thousands of students since I've been chancellor who are very eager to be back on campus. And we think this pathway will enable us to do that for as many folks as possible.
Thank you. And can you talk about how you see this vaccine requirement playing out for not just students, but also faculty and staff? Because you know, our campus community wants to understand what the breadth of the requirement will be.
You bet. Well, we're talking about this policy with the with all the different parts of the university. So with the students, with the faculty, and with the staff. And we will be going through the meet and confer process around the policy and to really listen carefully to everybody, because I think in general, folks agree with the goal here of trying to protect the safety of all. And we want to make sure as we finalize the policy that we address any potential unintended consequences that would be negative. So there will be the full opportunity for consultation with our faculty and staff. And you know, my sense is that so many of our faculty and staff have been vaccinated. And my hope is that those who haven't will now be able to get vaccinated, because vaccines appear to be readily available at this point. We were concerned about that earlier, as you know, President Papazian, kind of the unevenness of distribution. But I think we're getting to a point pretty quickly where the vaccinations are pretty widely available, and that will give our faculty and staff the chance to be vaccinated, as well as our students, before the fall.
Yeah, thank you for that. And clearly for us, and I know it's a commitment of yours as well, that this be done in an equitable way, available to all of our communities, and that also there be a mechanism for our international students to be vaccinated. And so will the international students be addressed in the policy? This is one of our, we have so many that they're wondering about how they will be covered.
Absolutely. And The requirement will go into effect upon authorization of the first vaccine. So we think that'll be Pfizer, and that will enable those who have vaccines from wherever they were to fulfill the requirement. So if an international student has been vaccinated in their home country, our policy will allow for that.
Thank you. And the next group of questions is about repopulation, and clearly expanded vaccinations make a more robust repopulation possible.
Yeah.
We have a question here on how you think the CSU campuses across the state should repopulate. What should be some of the guidelines, and what kinds of steps should campuses take?
Thank you. Well, I did provide guidelines to each campus, and really it's very important for each campus to consult with their county public health departments, as well as follow the guidelines of the California Department of Public Health and the CDC. And I anticipate, based on my conversations with our elected officials, that if things continue to run the course that they have been over the last couple of weeks, we should start to see more relaxed requirements. And so there's a way in which we need to pay attention to what is currently required, and to have those conversations about what will be anticipated. So it does require some creativity and imagination. And my own feeling is that by the time we get to August and September, when our campuses are open for the fall, that the situation is going to be quite different than it has been and even is today.
Well, I borrowed the phrase, and I've been using it myself, of pragmatic optimist. And I hear, Chancellor Castro, a pragmatic optimism in your responses. Let me follow up then, in linking the guidelines of campuses to the county health guidelines. It suggests, of course, that each campus may have a slightly different repopulation plan and strategy. How do you see these strategies playing out differently on campuses? Because we know that many of our colleagues, have colleagues at other campuses with whom they speak regularly. So how would you help people see that?
Yeah, I think it's very important that people understand that obviously we're part of a system, but we're located in different places. And with respect to public health, the counties have quite a lot of discretion. Now, in talking to the governor, his goal is to try to coordinate that as well as possible with the state, because we want to make sure that when we get guidance from the state, that it complements the guidance at the county level, and in some cases would provide us with some uniform approaches across the 23 campuses. In my own opinion, that would be very helpful, as opposed to trying to figure out the details at 23 different campuses with their counties, and in some cases dealing with multiple counties that may have different perspectives. So there's some art to this, but I think in our advocacy with the state government is really to try to get as much clarity as we can for our entire system, so that there could be as much uniformity in terms of the regulations. And then where there does need to be some differences, that we respect that, and I totally understand. So there's not like a one size fits all sort of approach at this point because of all the different counties. But my hope is the trend lines are going in the right place, and that will enable us to repopulate at a higher level, I hope, and certainly more than a majority.
Thank you. And last question on repopulation. Our staff is wondering when they will be able to attend conferences or in-person training. When do you see the in-person kinds of gatherings of that sort resuming?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know the presidents and I will be talking about this whole issue at our next meeting, and we have provided some travel guidance. So with respect to travel, President Papazian, if there's an important need, then of course, and the CDC allows it, then that would be allowable travel. In terms of in-person events, I think that that's something that we have to see how the situation evolves and what the guidelines are going to be in the fall. But my sense is, again, based on what I'm seeing across California, that there's going to be much more latitude to do that. And then it'll be a matter of, what makes sense at the campus level. I know in talking to you, President Papazian, you have one of the most dense campuses. So that certainly needs to be taken into account as well. But I'm hopeful. I mean, the fact that Disneyland is open and people can go to theaters now and do lots of things, that gives us the potential pathway to have some of those kinds of events in the fall.
So a phase in as we repopulate over time. Yeah, that's stay tuned, in other words.
Yeah, I think so. And, in this pandemic, 2 or 3 months is kind of an eternity, right? I mean,
Oh my
so
goodness.
we'll see how things evolve.
Yeah, thank you. And the next group of questions is really about the impact of the pandemic on the way we think about work and about the pedagogy of teaching.
Yes.
So as we come out of the pandemic, do you see online classes and working from home as part of the future, or do you see them being phased out? How do you see us really coming out of this pandemic? It's a two-part question. So if you'd like to take the work part first and then perhaps talk about the teaching.
Yeah. Well, I think from, again, talking to our students, so many of them seem to want to be back. And that's where I start is what will that take for us to serve that need? And then that kind of connects to the work part, because in so many respects, their interest in being in person versus online is going to be this interaction between the campus and the students. So what will it look like? It may look differently at each campus, but I don't think we're going back to where we were last year. We're going to go to a new place and we'll find our way. I do think that we'll need to be flexible as appropriate because of the changing dynamics in our country, and also to be compassionate about those who might be taking care of others. So it's going to be a different scenario, and I also see it evolving over time. And the exciting part for me is that we've had so many creative programs that have emerged during the pandemic with all this stress, that when we remove the stress, I think it's going to be really exciting to see what else will happen in the future. And you certainly are at the forefront of that in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing as well is this focus on students, and certainly that's our commitment here at San Jose State, faculty, staff, the entire leadership team, really making decisions based on what's best for students. And so they don't expect the same kind of thing as they saw before. But we'll see where that goes.
Yes.
One of the challenges for us here in Silicon Valley and at San Jose State, and this really turns to this workforce issue and the pressures on our staff and faculty. And our students, by the way, cost of living is significantly different for campuses depending on where they are in the state. And we're certainly at the highest cost of living in California, if not in the country. Will there be any adjustment to salary, to income, to budget, or how will the cost of living be taken into account as we think about supporting our workforce?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is the first time that it's come up during my campus visit. So it has prompted me to think about it in a slightly different way. As you and I have talked about, President Papazian, I've really tried to lean into the equity issues and to figure out the best way to align our budget with our aspirations around equity. And there is there are equity dimensions to the challenge that you're outlining that I think are important for us to acknowledge and to figure out ways as a system where we can support San Jose State in such an expensive, relatively expensive area. So I'm interested in learning more and exploring ways where we can be helpful. The conversations that we have been having about the budget have really been how do we align our investments with closing the equity gaps that exist in our system, and that's kind of been one of the hallmarks. So now I think we need to see how that impacts other considerations and to think about whether additional adjustments are needed.
Yeah, and we appreciate, and I know I speak for the campus, very much your openness to having the conversation. Our faculty, our departments have done a really extraordinary job in attracting diverse candidates to our faculty, as well as our staff in hiring in staff positions. But the challenge is retention, and cost of living is a factor there. And the next question really is layered on top of that challenge. About 40% of the current workforce reaches retirement in the next 5 years. So we really are at one of those inflection points.
Wow. Yeah.
How will the CSU recruit and maintain newer staff to take us through our next phase?
It's a really important question. And that's a staggering statistic, 40% within 5 years. I believe that we should continue to invest and perhaps invest more in professional development so that we can be ready for that, and to find ways in which we can grow our leaders on the campuses as we also attract important leaders from outside the campus. So I think leaning into this issue, where are those vacancies going to be? How do we create a opportunity for others to grow so that they can assume leadership in some of those areas? And one of the things I love about the CSU, and I'm sure it's the case at San Jose State, is you have folks who've been there for many, many years, who've basically dedicated their large part of their lives because they love the mission and the values. And to try to attract more people like that is very important in the years ahead, and to help them grow is a very important priority for me. So I'll do whatever I can, President Papazian, to support you in doing that, and with all the other presidents as well throughout the system.
Well, I thank you for that. The next two questions, actually, you've already really addressed, but I want to repeat them and then express our commitment to work with you to address it. And this is really about professional growth for our staff at all levels. We have extraordinary staff. They come into us at different levels, but they are committed to this lifelong learning mode and to having a chance to reach their potential while still serving our students. So as you think about the possible kinds of programs at the chancellor's level, at the system level, know that we here at San Jose State are ready to work with you to continue to develop those programs.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
So the other question is on the workforce is really about our faculty and tenure density.
Yes.
What actions will it take? What will need to change for us as an institution and as a system to achieve 75% tenure density in the next decade?
Yes, I'm very eager to increase tenure density. I do believe that that's connected to our success in inspiring greater investment of especially state funds, but even other dollars that help us to recruit and retain the very best. So I think that is connected in an important way, and we'll have to keep our foot on the pedal in terms of our advocacy efforts. When I was appointed in September, I was told that we were going to have our worst budget year in history. And I think that we are possibly going to have one of our best. And that's because we've been really very effective together as a CSU in making our case. And while more is needed, I'm really pleased that we're able to, looks like we'll be able to restore the cut that we've incurred this year, and then that there'll be additional dollars that can be used. And I applaud your efforts, President Papazian, in continuing to recruit the very best faculty from all different backgrounds, even during the pandemic. And my hope is that we can maintain that kind of momentum, because it does, in my opinion, connect to our graduation initiative goals to increase graduation rates and to decrease and eliminate gaps. I see a connection there, especially to the extent that we can recruit more talented faculty from diverse backgrounds who really understand the lived experiences of the students that we serve.
Yeah, thank you for that. And a final question on our staff and faculty. What is your short and long-term plan for supporting the hardworking staff community?
Well, I think the most important thing that I did right as I became chancellor was to work with all of you and to announce there'd be no furloughs and no layoffs due to budget. And I think that was an important first step in terms of, because I could tell the stress levels were extraordinarily high in January for a lot of good reasons. But I thought it was important that we send that very powerful signal, as well as the one around no tuition increases for our students and families. So number one, I think, is to stabilize, restabilize, and then to find ways to reinvest over time in our staff, and to really recognize that they are the backbone of the CSU and deserve our greatest respect and support. So in terms of the specifics, I think, you would have a better sense of that at San Jose State, and I'd want to support you and all the other presidents to have what you think are the strongest programs to recruit and retain the very best people from all backgrounds.
Well, thank you. And I know that our staff were and faculty and the entire community were very much relieved about our not having to move to furloughs and very challenging in a challenging budget times when they're impacted by so many other things. So
Yes.
just an expression of thanks for that. Let's look now at some educational policy issues. Back right to our core mission. You've talked a lot about closing the equity gaps. I have a question here about really understanding your expectation around the CSU closing the equity gaps by 2025. Are we going to hit our mark?
I certainly hope we'll hit our mark. Based on what I can tell, we're in pretty good shape to hit our graduation rate targets. But we need to redouble our efforts around the equity gaps. And it might be that as we look beyond 2025, that we'll look at this area even in a different way. And you and I talked about that this morning. But in terms of the way that we're looking at it today, I am concerned with some of the gaps that I'm seeing for underrepresented students and for Pell students. And it's not always, it's not always the same for each group. I remember at Fresno State, we were working so hard on this, just like you are at San Jose State, and our underrepresented gap was quite modest, but the Pell gap was stubborn. We were making improvements, but it was way too high, in my opinion. And so how do we get it to zero is really the question I'm trying to answer with all of you. And what will it take in terms of resources and strategies? And again, there's not going to be a one size fits all approach, but how can I, as chancellor, inspire greater investment of public and private resources that could be used in the most powerful ways at San Jose State and the other campuses, so that we can eliminate those gaps by 2025?
Well, it'll take a lot of work for all of us. And certainly one element, of course, that impacts our students is the financial side.
Yeah.
And so the next question is about, really understanding how we can better help our students, many of whom are first generation, as you were, attain their degrees without taking on crippling debt. How is the Chancellery thinking about that part of the question?
Well, this is a very important part of my job with all of you as presidents, President Papazian. Number one, we need to get the Pell Grant increased, and that will make a huge difference for our lowest income students. We also need to get our Dreamers connected to the Pell Grant, and President Biden has announced that that will begin to happen. I would love to see some immigration reform so that it is a permanent sort of a solution. So those are very important changes on the federal level that'll make a powerful difference. And then on the state level, there are conversations about reconfiguring the Cal Grant that, if they're done properly, could be really good for our students. There's a bill going through the legislature right now, and we're trying to work with Assemblyman Medina and the California Student Aid Commission to ensure that our students are treated well through that change. And then, like, you're leading the way with your campaign, your fundraising campaign. I found as president, there are a lot of people out there that want to contribute to scholarships and fellowships, and I think it's very important for us to inspire more private fundraising for those things. And to the extent we're focusing on graduate education that's important to the federal government, I think that's another way that we can be helpful, is to try to inspire more federal agency investments in our graduate education programs.
Yes, and I will say, I'll just put a plug, our own Vice President for Student Affairs, Patrick Day, is serving as a commissioner on the Student Aid Commission
Right.
of California. So very much look forward to seeing where that can go. One last question on policy, educational policy. Are there
Sure.
conversations or plans to stop using standardized test results for admission at both the undergraduate and graduate levels after the pandemic? We know it was on pause during the pandemic, but what will happen when the pandemic comes to an end?
Yeah, I think that's still in discussion. I think we've learned a lot during this time. And my own feeling is it seems like it's worked pretty well without them so far. And I just want to have those conversations with you and other presidents before we make a final decision with the Academic Senate.
And hopefully very, very data driven as well, to see the disparate impact on our students. I'd like to turn now to a question around social justice, very much something that we're all grappling with
Yes.
today. How do you plan to address systemic racism in the CSU? And as a corollary to that, what are your plans to expand services and support for staff and students of color?
Thank you. Well, I think it's important that we express our points of view. I've done that with each of the presidents, including you, President Papazian, so that our communities understand that we're taking a stance against racism, that we're going to pursue actively anti-racist policies and practices. And that's one of the reasons why I'm looking at how we allocate our resources, because I want us to use an equity frame there. I want us to continue to use an equity frame as we hire staff and faculty and administrators. I think that we also need to continue to be mindful of the student population and some of the areas where we can do better. For example, talking with your cabinet today, we want to try to do even better in attracting more African-American students. I'd like to do that across the CSU, and that will require even greater collaboration with our K through 12 system. So those are some of the examples of ways in which I think we can demonstrate our commitment to racial equity in California and beyond. And as the nation's largest public university system and arguably the most diverse. We have a lot to say about that. We have some good stories to tell and more that we need to tell in the future in terms of attracting even greater diversity going forward.
Thank you. And we're about at the end of our time. So I want to leave you with one final question. And then as you respond to it, perhaps let it move into your final comments. I will say thank you to you for joining us today.
Thanks, Mary.
In what ways does San Jose State stand out among the CSU campuses? And the other corollary to that, in your opinion, is what links all the CSU campuses?
Yeah. Well, the linkages I have learned, this is my 6th visit, and I just love the connection, the powerful connection between the campus and the community in terms of the students, where they come from, the stories I was hearing this morning. I'm a 2nd generation Spartan, or even 3rd, and as well as 1st generation students. I know you serve many 1st generation students as well, but that I've certainly experienced that in Fresno, San Bernardino, Dominguez Hills, and a little bit in Humboldt. I think they could use a little bit more of this. I'm going to try to help them with that. But that's certainly a theme, just the deep connections. And as the oldest of the CSUs, the roots are very deep. So I do see that, and certainly the mission and the values come through, the focus on access and success. And then in terms of the uniqueness, I think because of your positioning in Silicon Valley, I certainly am hearing some different strategies around innovation that are exciting. And I love the way in which you prepare so many leaders for positions in Apple and Cisco and other companies. And in so many ways, you're driving that innovation in Silicon Valley, which is a world hub for technological innovation. So that's exciting. That's unique and exciting. And your strong focus on graduate education is also something that that I haven't heard of in quite this way.
Well, thank you. And we could go on talking forever. I didn't get to all the questions, but I hope we covered a nice range of them. For the close to 300 people who are on the call today from San Jose State, I thank you for all you're doing in your role and for joining us here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.